And we are live. Now, Valhalla, 1986, thoughts, film. And we're gonna dive right into... You know what, actually, yeah, before, let me... No, never mind. Yeah, watch me waffle. And... Yes, these are notes taken while watching. And there we go. The very first couple of these notes I took before watching are not specifically related to events of the film. I'm gonna mention exactly when I get into those notes. Yes. Practically a Friday the 13th and not a horror-themed review. It is October, and I am expecting there will be at least one review of something horror-related, perhaps even currently in theaters, before this month is out. And basically all of these notes were voice-typed rather than finger-typed, I guess, however you say that. And the voice typing has trouble with some of these very Nordic names, so rather than using their names, you know, when I voice typed it, I use terms, but I don't know yet if I'm gonna just constantly correct, because I do know the names. I've watched this, I don't know, a couple dozen times probably. I've had it on video since 1993. And yeah, it has been maybe a year since I watched it last. Maybe more. I gotta do something about that. I gotta watch it more frequently. Back when I was younger, I watched it all the time. One of my favorite animated movies. And which means that it beat out several Disney ones, including Lion King. Let's see. I for sure had the... What's it called? The one with the... Jungle Book, the original Jungle Book. Pinocchio, and probably a couple of Hercules. I think I had Hercules. Hercules. Suddenly saying that name became a Herculean task. Probably others. So, yes. Anyway. I may call the children the human girl instead of Röskva, the human boy instead of Chalfi, and the troll child or the Jotun child instead of Quark. Quark it did sometimes get right, but you know, it's a space something term, I think, whereas the others are specifically names that, yeah. And as usual for a thoughts video, hence the, yeah, I can't just spoiler thingy up there. I'm very proud. I made it myself in paint. Yes, there will be spoilers throughout this, and as usual for thoughts video, I will be talking about things based on the idea that you have already watched this. I'm not gonna, you know, when I watch like Spoonie go over a movie, you know, he's gonna say, oh, and then there's this, and describe in detail, so you know what he's talking about. I don't usually do that in the thoughts videos. And what I mainly want to get at here is, if you haven't watched this yet and you watched the trailer, at least the English language trailer, don't worry, the movie is way more coherent than that trailer. That trailer is essentially a demo reel. It's like, look at all this varied cool animation we did, which they did. The movie has a very clear plot. I really don't know why they chose to just put out a demo reel instead, but that, yeah, the movie did work pretty well in theaters, so, you know, people must have been, you know, they clearly did not, you know, it didn't, sometimes bad marketing can really hurt a movie. This is where we get into specific notes that I took as the movie was playing. The opening sets the tone beautifully. You have the some of the time I am going to describe, it pans across this really big. I read that it was like 6 meters or something. I don't know. Maybe I'm misremembering, but it was big, and you see the I guess world tree is what it would be. I watched this in Danish, so everything I'm saying that they say in the, I'm going to be translating a lot of this into English, so some of it might come out gobbledygook. That is a wonderful world. You really should, when you're trying to say something is essentially nonsense, you really should use nonsense words like gobbledygook. Anyway, you see the world tree and its roots spreading out as the ravens, Hugin and Munin, describe the I don't know how you pronounce that in English. Odin's two ravens, as they describe, the world tree has its roots out in all the realms, and it describes Asgard, it describes Midgard, and it describes Jotunheim, and just beautifully done. And just amazing. I mean, I can't completely. When I first watched this, I already knew a ton of our mythology. So I don't know what it's like to watch this without already knowing a bunch of the myths. Honestly, I probably also read wait, did all the books come out? I'm not sure all the books had come out when they put out the movie. Some of them I think they were working on and put, I probably had read the books that had already come out. I've always thought our mythology, I mean, when I was a child, they told me immediately, Thunder is not actually a dude with a red hair and red beard, with a hammer that always returns to his hand, riding I never believed our mythology, but I was always fascinated by how people who didn't know exactly what it was explained it, because you have to explain things like that. You cannot, it's just, these things are too scary if you can't explain them at all. Anyway, I think I'm gonna go on. And one of the ravens says, the faith of humans give the gods life force keeps them alive. I had completely forgotten that they actually set that concept up right away, because that is what happens at the end of the movie. See, spoilers. When Thor is brought back to life by Chelfus, he believes, he insists, he still believes, and now, and after this very grand, very epic opening, and the ravens talk, then we go to Midgard, and suddenly it's, you've got the ravens flying, they quit squawking and leave. Just the atmosphere, you can immediately tell, okay, this is our world. It's so gritty, you can practically, like, when once it starts raining and such, you can practically feel the rain on your skin. It's just, and that is such, it helps so much when you then see these really out of this world things. It makes it very distinct. I think that's what the Nostalgia Critic also said about how, the original, I think the original is called, is it just called Willy Wonka? Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory? I don't know. I'm sorry, I don't really care about either. Never read the book, never watched the movies, don't care. I do like Roald Dahl. Lamb to the Slaughter is freaking brilliant. He wrote one or two other things that I also know nothing about, I think. I'm sure I would like his non-murder plot stuff as well. Anyway, the original Willy Wonka movie versus the Tim Burton one. Tim Burton's the world is kind of crazy even outside of Willy Wonka's, so it doesn't have as great of a contrast, and I can imagine that. And this movie has the contrast, and it doesn't spend very long in Midgard, but just, you have the epic opening setting up that this is a story about gods and Jotun, and and then you're on Earth, and it's just, it's one thing that you see Chalfa being bored and stuck on boring old Earth, but you feel it too. Very, statistically speaking, very few of the children who watch this have themselves had to chop wood, but seeing it does still, every kid understands, chores that are tedious and boring, and you feel like it'll just never end, because as a child you don't have a full concept of time, so yeah, it's just it immediately sets that this is completely the real world. It's not very interesting, but so they're also, when the gods travel to Midgard, it's probably the single most exciting thing that will ever happen to this family. And yeah, even if they hadn't lost both of their children to it, it would be something I would never forget. It would be something that when, like, other people came over, they would say, where you're sitting, Thor once sat there. This movie just has toned down pat, and that's one of the things that I am going to try not to badmouth people who don't like this movie, because you don't have to like this movie, and it's perfectly fine if you don't. I think you're completely wrong, but that's your business. That's not my business. It's not the best animated movie I've ever seen, and certainly there are things that are kind of issues with it that other animated films don't have. I am not at all. There are definitely better animated movies out there, but I do still think, I maintain that this is it's still one of the best ever made. And if you don't get that, then that's none of my business. Now, and the first is just Chalfa out there, and then Röska runs out there, and then the mother yells for Chalfa to come in. Then Röska runs out again, and she's like, "Come in, both of you, or I send Dad out to get you." Now that's a threat. Back then, he would not be gentle with them. And then as Thor flies closer, we see the father all meek and scared, despite of that threat, setting up the awe he feels in the presence of these gods. And I really love that. You see them off in the distance, and you see Thor with the hammer and the lightning bolts, and then they're scared, so they walk in, and they look at the door, and we don't see them outside. We just, the door opens, and and then it's Loki first, who is considerably less impressive than Thor, and Loki's like saying, "The mighty Thor," and one of the goats walk in, and it's all proud. "Yeah, I know I'm hot stuff." Some of the humor is very child oriented, but I do think a lot of it works. I think a lot of it you can find funny even, and I don't think that the child oriented elements ever. The movie is never completely taken over by them to the point where the adults are just like checking their watch or whatever. even when it's complete, like when they're in the woods and they're building the treehouse, they're sitting there eating and the whole thing. There's still, you can appreciate the artistry that it's not just like completely childish. And I mean, considering, I don't know, I mean, it was 1986, but today if you watch something child oriented, well, to be fair, I don't watch very much child oriented, but years back when I did, there were just a ton of fart jokes and burping and just gross out humor and such. And it's just, there's really not that much of it in this, considering how a lot of it is fairly child oriented. And certainly, I think a lot of it is told from the perspective of children, which also makes the gods seem even greater. They're adults and they're gods. But what was I gonna say? Yeah, considering that, there's really not, it's not completely without. Loki farts during the eating competition. Is that the only one? That might actually be the only one. Yeah, and I didn't, I didn't voice type it, but when Thor is like angry with Quark that first time, he, spanks him like 3 times or something. And it's Thor, this guy can, he's incredibly strong. He also breaks the table by, just slamming. Did he have his hammer there? Or did he grab it right? Anyway, he manages to smash through this big, long table just like that, So after he's done that, Quark's, there's like, how if like something gets extremely hot, there'll be a little bit of, is it smoke? I guess, not thick smoke. And Quark looks down, there's that, and he just, blows it away. Just, yeah. Again, you get a real sense. Yeah, he is incredibly strong, and Quark is incredibly tough. It actually reminds me of there's a joke in one of the Quark comic books where like he moves in with like a troll family, for people who aren't aware of the comics. That's more or less it. There's a bunch of characters. There are characters, but yeah, he moves in with them and he starts going to school and just and the troll father is like angry at Quark. It's comic strips. It's not, the Valhalla books are comics with stories, but what I read of the Quark books at least were comic strips. Excuse me. And one of the strips, it's 3-panel thing, and the troll father's angry with Quark, and he's like, "This is gonna hurt you more than it's gonna hurt me." He's about to spank him, and then like the troll child, I think he's thinking to himself. I don't think he says this out loud. It's like, he's got that right, and off panel, he's like smack, and he yells, "Ow!" And then it cuts back. 3rd panel, you see, and it's got like, and the troll child finishes the thought. Quark keeps cactuses in his back pockets, and there's like all these cactus things sticking out of the troll child's hands. Anyway, and back to the movie. Chalfa is like, he's talking about how he wants to be a warrior like Thor, and he pokes at the cow, and Voskva laughs at him because that's, you could say that it's fairly, the gender roles are fairly stereotypical here. It's been ages since I read directly from the myths. I think probably in like, in class of some, yeah, so I don't, but I think there were probably, detail about, there were probably a lot of details about it that were very gender, this is not a movie, it's not the most progressive movie, but it is, a lot of it is retelling of the legend, the myths, the mythology. And and they're eating, and Thor's like, throw the bone onto the, what's it called, an animal skin, hide, goat hide, I guess. That's the thing that I play Septerra Core, Legacy of the Creator, and it's like every time I fight a wolf, I get some hide, and I get, every store I go to, I can sell that hide. What do they do with all these animal pelts? Anyway, they're throwing bones on it, and over a few seconds it fades, so time has passed. We see just a massive pile of bones. They had a lot to eat, and Thor probably ate most of it. Well, he ate more than the others, not necessarily combined, but yeah. I really love the stylized look we get at Thor trying to catch the Midgard serpent, which also does happen in one of the books, but was that released? But I read book 1, 4, and 5. Book 1 is Chafin Roshkvat, arriving. This entire first part of the movie is in that book, and I think it's called Cry Wolf. In Danish, it's like the wolf is loose, but Cry Wolf, that's pretty good. And the fourth one is the story of Quark, which is Loki arriving back. It does apparently depict Loki in Jotunheim getting it, but some jerk ripped out it might not have been intentional, but there's like a bunch of pages missing, so I don't know exactly what. It's been a really long time since I read it whole, but I'm almost certain I read it whole at least once when I was younger. Anyway, and then the 5th book is them returning to Jotunheim. I ended up not voice typing in any. I'm just gonna call him Udgårdsloke because that's the Danish. I have no idea what he would be called in English. And again, I take a lot of pride in our mythology. Our mythology, our healthcare, our social democracy. These are our myths. They are not England's myths. They are Danish, Swedish, and Norwegian. So the fact that this was made to sync up with English voices, even though it was being made by Danes, I have worked out most of my frustration about that aspect. But I have no idea. I have no intention of ever listening to the English dub, because it is a dub. The correct version is the Danish version. I don't even care if I didn't really recognize the actor names, I don't think, but I don't care who you put on it. Maybe Udo Kier. Him, I would respect Udo Kier in something to do with mythology. Excuse me, I just have to make sure that the thing isn't. Okay, it is not, in fact, trying to reboot without my telling it to. Anyway, so I don't know what he's called. I'm going to call him Udgårdsloke if I refer to him at all. And for people who have no idea the character I'm referring to here, he badly needs like his nails are all messed up and he's got the huge beard. It seems like he's basically the leader of Jotunheim maybe or something, but yeah, I mean, dude really needs a manicure, which I've always thought, seems a little bit like torture to me. I'll clip my nails on my own, thank you very much, and I do not want a nail file anywhere near me. Anyway, but yeah, one of the books does have Thor trying to catch the Midgard serpent. I did not read that for this one. Now, and great effects on the magic that brings back to life the goat. The music and sound effects for it are perfect. It really has this. Sure, this is something Thor does every time he's eaten one of his goats, but it still has the otherworldly quality to it. It does not seem natural. It's not of this world, and the kind of glowy stuff to it, and the music of it, and the whole. It really has absolutely perfect. I really, really appreciate that Chalfie saying goodbye to Röskva is not undercut by a joke. And at the end of the book, there's also Thor does give Chelfe a sword, showing that he is starting to think of him as more of a warrior. He's not just saying, oh, maybe someday I'll let you come with on an adventure. No, and and then he says, remember, a true warrior also knows when not to use his sword. And in the book, Loki says, oh, you would know, and then Thor's like, oh, what are you talking about? I greatly prefer the movie where it is not at all undercut. I think that's the movie in general does great at not undercutting. Now, the book explains the reason they're using the Rainbow Bridge is that the goat cannot fly them with the broken leg bone. That in case I suppose you could maybe surmise it, that they flew in, but now it has broken bones, so now they're using the Rainbow Bridge. But anyway, I am not gonna go the whole thing of the bone being broken and such. I'm gonna go into detail about that in the next section. In the section stuff I noted, notes taken before watching, because that's something I remember really well, and I also took down some notes while reading the book a few days ago. I really love the scope we see when Chelfe is walking on the Rainbow Bridge for the very first time. Such a far drop below them, and him, like, at first he's like can really, he kind of steps on with like one foot and then jumps up and starts walking across. Just, yeah, again, it is this otherworldly, you could very easily just show it, but what's that? Yeah. Anyway, yeah, so let's see. But yeah, anyway, they get to the, they walk across the Rainbow Bridge, and then we see Chelfe is still chopping wood, just like he was on Midgard. It's just now with a much bigger, heavier, unwieldier axe. And I really love the cut from Loki whining and crying about being stuck down the well, Quark really not helping, and to Thor's two infants crying, and just that is really great. I mean, we don't see, at least not in the movie, I forget if it's in the book, but actually, yeah, I think it might be in the book that, like, I think Loki maybe goes, I mean, it is a well, he's like getting water, and Quark walks up behind him and kicks him in the butt, and he falls down, and Loki can try to climb up the rope, but every time that Quark like lifts it or suddenly yanks it down, it's gonna make it harder for Loki to keep his grip on it, and yeah. And Thor tells Chelfe that he might get to go troll hunting someday, and he's just ecstatic, and immediately tells Röskva, Thor, mightiest of the gods, completely incapable of dealing with an infant. And that's again where it's very gender stereotypical with these, like, why are they crying? Can you do something? I mean, he's trying to cheer them up by doing cutesy stuff that babies normally like, but they're toothing. I don't know what it's called in English, but they're getting the teeth are growing in, and that hurts, so they're crying a lot. And Sif is like, yeah, they're tooth. There's an, she's not, she's empathetic to their pain, and she's like, she gets that it's like bothering him, but yeah, there's nothing she can do about that. I really love how this movie depicts magic, and this, I voice typed this while Loki is, he's trying to transform the apple. But yeah, it takes effort, often requiring ingredients. There's flashing, glowing. It's not just a snap of fingers, That is something that I feel like just too much today. There's this idea. It's because, with just, with a couple of, with very few finger movements, you can check Twitter, although I don't know why you would, put on a movie or something. So we get this, we've gotten accustomed to things being able to, but, back in the day, it was a process. So, just compare the, how they use the Force in the original movies, and then, the episodes 1 through 3, where they can do an insane amount with just no effort. And especially in the third one, it looks like it's just, they don't. Anyway, I really love Quark playing with the infants and the pacifiers, the music, the animation, the sound effects. Just like he's making music, he just understands that when they cry when he takes it out, they stop crying when he puts it in. So yeah, and that is kind of, at this point in the movie, Quark is not displaying empathy. He doesn't help Loki out of the well, and the cries of the infant are literally music to him. But once they're in the woods, once he realizes that he upset Röskva, then he clearly shows that he is capable of empathy. And for the rest of the movie, he clearly has a lot of empathy for Röskva, and certainly some for Chalford. And yeah, at that point, the only people that he continues to bite and smack and such are Thor, Udgårdsloke in disguise, and yeah. And one of the infants dropped the pacifier, so Quark gets it and holds it up towards it, and I think it's his finger. It bites his finger because it doesn't really understand. It's just and he's like, ow, that hurt. And so he grabs with both of his hands around the leg, and we just see his mouth. I appreciate that we didn't see it. That would be just, that's a little, when the fact that it's happening off screen is a little funny, but if we saw it, it would be really unpleasant to, And, Sif is like, Loki, how long is that brat gonna stay here? And he's like, until we teach him manners. And she's like, I can't wait that long. We're out of here. She grabs both of the infants. In the book, it specifies they're going to Vanaheim to live with some of her family, and that is again, when if a woman moves away from her partner, she might move back in with her family. And Thor, in his rage, is as destructive as Quark in his hunger. At this point in the movie, Quark hasn't really been destructive otherwise. And, he may be impressive, but he's also very quick to anger, and his destruction doesn't only hit his enemies. And that, again, is something that, that is the perception of Thor from the myths, and that's also something they had to address in the MCU movies, which is why the first movie is really the only one where he's really he reacts when he feels like smacking someone. He's gonna do it, Now, and let's see. And Loki knows that he's not gonna be the only. He's not gonna be the one to clean up. So he doesn't care if he makes a huge mess when he's making breakfast, And honestly, I had forgotten, and I think there's maybe some of it in the book, but really in the movie, Quark is not destructive intentionally, particularly. He bites the infant out of spite, and he smacks Röskva out of spite. But immediately after, when he sees she's sad, he does try to make her happy again. He doesn't really do anything destructive out of spite, or just because he doesn't, when he smashed a bunch of stuff, that was, he was hungry, and he doesn't really understand or care that he's breaking a lot of stuff. Also, he doesn't just go out and smash a thing. He saw something on a top shelf he wanted, so we don't really see it in the movie, but in the comic we clearly see he's like crawling up this stack of plates, and he gets like a, but then or is it? You know what? I'm having trouble. I'm mixing the two up. Anyway, yeah, in the books he is more kind of spitefully destructive, where really in the movie he's not. He doesn't tend to be destructive out of just spite. Well, also most of what he does towards Loki is out of spite, but it's Loki. It's kind of funny. Anyway, and Chelfa and Röskva, they aren't always right, but they do have a sense of fairness. They know that Loki's treatment of them is unfair, and that's also, Röskva, in talking to Odin, she specifically says, I like Thor, I like Sif, but Loki never helps out. Now, let's see. And, as they walk into... Yeah, I didn't voice type it, but I like how you have Röskva and Quark moving towards, they're trying to find Odin. And Hugin and Munin, his two ravens, land on the tops of their heads. And they say all kinds of things. And, like, some of the time it seems like they understand Röskva, and then some of the times, like, that's not what I meant at all, and just they're fun characters. And then like when they're about to leave, one of them is like, follow us, and they're like echoing each other, and the other one starts to go, follow us, and he's follow up, and because like Quark like looks up, he very suddenly looks up, I think because he's looking at the one that's flying away from Röskva's head. And the other one wasn't prepared, so it just dips really quickly back, yeah. And, they get to Odin, they get to the gate, and they start walking in, and Röskva is like slowly walking up, because she knows that they have to be careful, and Quark doesn't really understand that, so he's just walking in there, and she like grabs the back of his like pants or something, and he just keeps walking in place. He doesn't really seem to notice. I love the music, sound effects, and almost speech of the living chess pieces. And, the Rolf the guard, which the IMDb trivia notes that outside of Rolf the guard, every single character in this is from Nordic myth, But there's no guardsman named Rolf in there. And Quark. I'm fairly certain, I'm almost certain I read once that Quark was made up specifically for the movie, and then he's also in, briefly in the comics, and then he has his own comics. But as far as I know, he doesn't have a direct correlation, coronary. He doesn't have a direct coronary to a character in the myths, but let's see. Yeah, other than that, anyway, he comes in and starts to, he's trying to get them out of there, and he's being this very military cliche, character. And like the chess pieces, they're kind of curious when he comes in, but when Odin speaks, they run off terrified and they jump into like it seems like the box is specifically to store chess pieces in. And the disembodied head of Mipma, who in the myths, if I recall correctly, Odin gave one of his eyes, his left eye, I believe, to drink from the well of Mipma, which grants you, is it all the wisdom in the world? Something like all the knowledge in the world, I think. Something like that, or wisdom. And then he also gets, the two ravens, will return to him and give him, updates. And that's again just such a, the thought back then, they would see ravens and they would think that raven might be flying back to Odin to tell him what's happening, and that's how he knows everything. Because it's just fascinating to me that, and again, it is. I mean, ravens are really creepy, and they were before Edgar Allan Poe got his hands on one. So of course they had. It's okay. It's just, it's a spy. It's just here to gather information so that Odin knows everything, so that the Aesir, I think is how it's written, Aesona, will be able to so that they are still stronger than the Jotuns of Jotunheim. And I actually saw that on at least one Wikipedia page, it seemed like it was spelling Aesir like ass, which I think is a little harsh. I mean, some of them maybe, but some of them are quite nice. And let's see. And yes, once they're in the woods, Quark genuinely does feel bad that he made Röskva cry. And he's like, pacifier, so he stuffs it in her mouth, since that worked on the infants. And he's like, oh, honey, and he holds out the what's it called, the beehive towards her, and she doesn't say anything, but she's like, I'm not gonna drink from a beehive. That's not gonna happen. And he's like, well, let's see. And then he grabs like the top of like a mushroom, and it's like, it has like an inside. So he pours the honey into it, and then he slides the honey bowl over to her, and it's like, is that good? Is that okay? And and she hugs him, and yeah, it's really sweet. It's just, and she had said she's hungry. She was hoping that Odin would help, that Odin would make Loki treat them better, and they would be able to return to Thor's place, Bilskirna. But Odin doesn't take kindly to Quark bouncing, he throws Mima's head in the air several times like it's a ball. Again, I mean, he doesn't seem to do it out of spite. He just thinks this is fun. He doesn't necessarily completely realize that. I don't know, I guess the first time he really shows empathy is after making her cry. That's when he really... But anyway, yeah, now that they didn't get any help from Odin, if they walk back to Bilskirna, they have to face the music. They didn't get any help, so Loki is going to keep mistreating them. So, yeah, they're now walking in the woods instead, and she's talking about how she's hungry, and it's, Quark may not understand everything, but he clearly can comprehend, think far enough to help solve problems. She talks about she's hungry, and he gets the honey, and that also, it's just, with Quark, yeah, he's there for the kids to laugh at and such, but it's not one of those things where he's just completely... On this rewatch, I expected to find him way more frustrating than... Yeah, I really didn't find him frustrating much at all. I kind of find him frustrating a little bit in the books. I feel like some of the time they bicker too much. Especially in the woods, Kjellfe and Röskva, they're constantly, Kjellfe wants to take charge and give orders, and Röskva is like, why do you have to be in charge? And then they keep repeating this argument, and yeah, the movie does, thankfully streamlines it. There's no real argument. It's just that Kjellfe gets angry about the rope, but Roskva shows, in the book they have an argument about that. It's like, oh, why should you do that? No, but look, he did this. And that's not going to do any good. Anyway, in some ways the books are better, in some ways the movie is better. But yeah, a lot of characters like that are just completely unbearable, or maybe there's a little bit of redemption, but it feels really forced. With Quark, it doesn't feel forced. Legitimate. What do you think you would be like if you lived in Jotunheim? You see Jotunheim, in the second half of the movie or so. Does it look like a place that would engender, good values? Look at how the adults are behaving. Of course, one of their children is also, the moment that Röskva shows, he is as nice or as mean as the people around him. And at first, when he arrives in Asgard, he's still used to Jotunheim. So, yeah, and, I don't blame Thor and Sif for not having the patience for him. You cannot have someone who's going to bite an infant. Yeah, that's crazy. But when, once he bites Thor, when Thor is like grabbing the treehouse and shaking so they fall out and such, and he bites Udgårdsloke, the people who don't treat him well, and Thor's reaction is also really extreme. And again, that's when Quark is being treated well, he's helpful, he's really, really useful, he's nice, for example, it would have been if he had tried to take the I forget, do we see, I guess it's like a hog or something that I can totally see Quark like being able to capture and kill one of those. And they cook it over fire, and clearly all three of them are eating. If Quark wanted to, he could have taken all that for himself, and he seems like he'd be hungry enough to eat all of it, but he doesn't. They get food as well, and he also doesn't keep the treehouse, to himself. Yes, they helped build it, but again, it would be easy for him. But no, he genuinely does. He treats people as they treat him, more or less. And and about here, almost halfway through. Actually, I guess halfway through the movie, considering I read 75 minutes, but that's with the end credits. Anyway, halfway through the movie, and Kjellfe gets the vision from Hugin and Munin that explains some of the witchcraft they will experience in Jotunheim, explaining what's really going on. Great clear body language during the woods sequence as they build the treehouse, and the whole. I love the whole. It's like, I think they spent 6 minutes in the woods from when they decide to build the treehouse to when Thor and they leave again, and it's all just. It's funny, it's light, the atmosphere, just. I've seen movies with far tighter plot. That's one of the things people criticize for, and there could be more plot, considering the length. The plot isn't always moving, and it's not always moving fast, certainly. Where, that's an engine. It's definitely too bright for thunder. It's I've seen movies where the plot moves a lot faster, where the atmosphere is much weaker. They're not anywhere near as good, whether it's animated or not, at setting, building an atmosphere and maintaining it. These are not easy things to do, even though this movie makes it look easy. And and I really love Quark's theme music. It's a little. it's kind of like clumsy, but also there's an energy to it, and yeah. And first we see Chalfe imagine this Viking treehouse, and Röskva's, it's a bit more feminine and such. And then Quark looks there and just hears a cuckoo, and he can't imagine anything there. It's pretty funny. And they're trying to deal with the wood for that, and he just fells an entire tree off screen by himself, seemingly without much effort, and just with ease carries it. I think he's only using the one hand, even if he is using both, just carrying this huge tree so that they can use it. And then he like chops it with his bare hands. I think, and it's one of the first times we see just how strong he really is, and I guess it is one of the only ones, isn't it? Which is weird, because whenever I think of the movie, I think, oh, Quark, he's super strong, but we don't actually see it. We see the strength of Thor more than, anyway. And Röskva and Quark are really sweet together. Yeah, and here I know, from when they first decide to build a treehouse to them eating in the treehouse, it's only 4 minutes of the movie. I really don't get why people are like, it takes so long. And I don't know, I mean, I guess, okay, let's say that, I guess you could say that Odin, them reaching Odin and talking to him doesn't forward the plot, essentially, because they don't get anything out of it. But, okay, yeah, so let's say Loki mistreating them, that's a plot point. That's plot, because they were okay with being servants there, but they're not okay with how badly Loki treats them. So when Loki mistreats them and throws them and locks them in the room, that's a plot point. From then on to Thor finding them in the treehouse and then deciding he's going to take Quark back to Jotunheim. Okay, I can see how you could argue that the plot doesn't really move between those, but there's so much atmosphere. It doesn't just rest on any one thing. When the movie was over, I was like, I felt like I just sat down 5 minutes ago. It moves so fast. I've seen movies praised that were way slower than this. Anyway, I really love the whistling, other instrumentation, and bone dancing when they're in the treehouse. And Chalfe does now accept Quark. But yeah, in the woods for 6 minutes from when they decide to build a treehouse to Thor finding them. I'm sorry, but the people who say this goes on for too long are just impatient. And also, it's so effectively done. They're sitting in the treehouse enjoying themselves, and suddenly Thor shows up. Like his head is the size of the doorway. It's not really a door. It's, I guess they don't want to starve to death on this deserted island with no door. And he grabs the house and shakes it so they fall out. And suddenly they're in this dark night, and just it's such, it really goes to mood. They were so happy. They were and then suddenly they have to be confronted with literally cold reality, cold hard reality, and yeah. And we see Jotunheim, and one of the Jotun makes a sandwich with a living rat and eats it. He's not going to cook it. He's not even going to kill the poor thing before he starts eating. At least he starts eating with the head first, so it dies quickly. But yikes. And then you've got this rat dinosaur thing, which is also something I really appreciate. They could easily have just been like, they're rats, whatever, they're rats. But no, they have this slight, they're not quite rats. And you've got this thing, it's got the stuff sticking out of its back, making me kind of think of like a dinosaur, but it's clearly not that either. And it's this, like, you get the sense that this is maybe what it looked like in places that human beings have not been able to do the whole, archaeologist thing. So we have never seen them, but they used to exist. And maybe some of them, like, maybe they had some weird offspring that they cast out and then went to Earth, and that's what rats are or something. I really appreciate that. Nothing in Jotunheim looks completely human. Certainly some of them look very human, but a lot of them have these exaggerated features, and they clearly not quite human. I mean, Udgårdsloke and the guy in the striped shirt, for example, they're way too big to be human. And they're bigger than the gods. We've seen gods stand next to humans in this movie. Gods and humans are roughly the same size. Certainly Thor and Loki are about the same size as normal human. Little taller, bigger, musclier, but Anyway. And the rat dinosaur thing, it eats the bone. I mean, it takes a couple of bites, but it does eat the whole thing just like that. Again, uncooked or anything, and there's no longer any meat on there. It's not just they're so crass and they're like drinking from the trough of beer, and there's like you've got the big fried boar, whatever, down there, and they grab those and eat and throw them away and drink from the trough. And then the pig gets up there and drinks from the trough too, and it doesn't put off the Jotun. And in fact, the Jotun and the pig drinking at the same time, it's like, I mean, I don't want to say anything because I don't want to be rude, but it kind of looks a lot like a pig when it's drinking from a trough. I mean, it already is kind of... They have, like, the drinking horns, too. It's not as though... It's not... No, just drink right from the trough. And so does the pig, and And we see that the cave that... they were sleeping in, it's actually the glove of this giant. I really love that the giant has an echo to his voice. And as they get across Jotunheim to... we see it as both as they walk, and before that when Skrymer, I think he calls himself, Udgårdsloke in disguise as a giant, And again, it's, he doesn't just instantly turn, it takes a couple seconds for him to shrink back to normal size. And anyway, Jotunheim has this vast, barren desert with skulls from dead animals in it. Again, it's evocative, we don't see everything of Asgard, but there's no barren desert there, it's not, so we do get the sense, and that's why they're so raw and crass, because they don't have, this beautiful nature. They have, that's, Röskva and Tjalfe and Quark go, they're not that far from, they're probably still in Asgard, they're just not in Valhalla. Anyway, beautiful, forest, tons of, living things, and just, we don't see a lot of animals, but the trees and grass and plants look healthy, and that is what, is it maybe that the Jotun were cast out of somewhere else, so they had to live in this really, I don't know. Let's see. And, they get in there, Thor's like, this belongs to you, about Quark, and, is about to walk away, and the Jotun, like, gang up, and they're blocking the door, and Thor is eager to fight them, but we do get the sense it's possible he would not be able to defeat all those Jotun by himself. He might actually be in over his head in this situation, and Udgårdsloke wants to settle it the way that he knows how, with witchcraft, with magic, with trickery. He doesn't say, Loki, you know magic, I know magic, let's have a competition and see who's the best at magic. No, he says, let's have a series of competitions. Whilst he is, again, it's this, he refuses to have an honest competition. He, instead, when Thor says, I demand a one-on-one fight, none of them step up to that. And Loki instead tricks him into fighting something he would never be able to defeat, old age. And just, it really, the character is very clear. And, even if you weren't even if you knew nothing about Jotunheim before watching this, even if you watched this as a child, you can clearly tell, it's communicating values. The good guys want an honest competition and they don't want to be tricked. And the bad guys deceive. They refuse. There's not a single one of the competitions that's entirely honest. And I mean, it's not even like Loki does not say, Loki, see if you can eat faster than fire. No, he says, here's an opponent, see if you can eat faster than him. At no point does he just, he only admits that he used trickery once he thinks that they are still stuck with Quark, once he thinks that they have, the Jotuns won. And let's see, there was a thing around here that I wanted to say. I think I have it in the other notes. I really love the music and animation during the eating competition. I'm not gonna try to read just the. You've got the Loki is eating. And it's like dum 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 dum, and then after eating a bunch, he looks up to check on his competition, and we see. Again, I'm just gonna go lue. We see lue, which in Danish literally means. I don't even know how to translate directly. I guess it's like part of a flame. It's anyway, he sees him, and then it plays that, what's it called? What's the dun 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 dun, and it's just beautifully done. Again, you could easily have just have it straight, but instead you have this. As I've rewatched The Jungle Book, Pinocchio, Hercules too, the Bellhop of Notre Dame, bunch of them. I really love the music, the musical numbers in them. They did a great job, but I feel like if they were doing the eating competition, the music wouldn't change. It's kind of it's probably not thought of as being as good. You would want instead lyrics to the musical that explain, now things have changed. And again, I mean, Frollo's, I'm not gonna mention it by name because I try not to swear in a lot of these videos. Frollo's song is amazing. One of the best pieces of music ever. But I really love that you have this, that's something this movie is so good at. Setting up a mood and changing it along the way and such. By, the music will play a little bit and then it'll maybe stop and then it'll play differently and And with all the food gone, the flame being merely eats the trough itself. The hunger of fire is never sated. and Udgårdsloge, talking about who will run against Chelfe is like, I have a certain competitor in mind. The Danish words literally translate to "in my thoughts," and that's literally what it is. I don't even want to think about how that line is probably butchered in English, but yeah, that's literally it. It is a thought, and let's see, and the moment that he thinks I've already won, then the thought won. And I mean, in the book, I think they say that it is specifically one of Udgårdsloge's thoughts. But I always got the sense that when the idea is that Chelfe looks, and then when he thinks I have already won, then the thought has already won. And that's also kind of goes to, that's something every person who competes in something big, don't think you've won until you have won. Don't let yourself be fooled into the idea that you have already won. Don't ever, not until the moment that you're absolutely certain that you have won. It's the tortoise and the hare thing, And I don't know, maybe I've always just, maybe it is supposed to be Udgårdsloge's thought rather than Chelfe. That's how I've always read it. And Chelfe notices the sounds of the ocean from the big, what's it called, drinking horn, and the soot on the trough that Loki and his competitor ate from. And Thor, after also not quite being able to lift the cat, he's like, I demand a one-on-one fight. That's something that also, I mean, it says something that they flat out refuse such a thing. But, it does also say something about Thor, that's what he that's how he solves his problems. He punches things really, really hard. That's, yeah. Now, and Udgårdsloge knew that he would demand that and prepared a being, old age incarnate, incarnate, in person, not impersonated. I think you know the word I'm looking for, so I'm just gonna move on. Embodied, that's it. And Loki doesn't want to talk to Chelfe because he's miserable from having eaten too much, which again, if you've ever tried to keep eating after you were no longer hungry, you know exactly what it's just, please leave me alone. Not right now, just, yeah. Let's see. And if I recall in the book, when Thor goes up to Elle, it's like, I think he does say, okay, let's wrestle or something. And I can imagine in the original, in the mythology, that is what he does. I really like that instead it's he says, let's, it's a dance. I don't fight old women, but I'll dance. May I have this dance, madam? Thor hates Jotunheim until it makes him dance. They do such a great job on the music and animation changing to in the movie in general, but as slowly it goes from a dance to her rapidly aging him, defeating him. Old age takes a hold of him and pushes him to the ground, takes away saps his strength and forces him to the ground, which just, I mean, we're seeing happen in, over the course of seconds, maybe a minute total or something, what literally happens to everyone who doesn't die earlier than from old age, but over decades, and that is something that's, yeah, I'm gonna go more into it, but it's an important thing to remember. It's a lesson to keep in mind. That's worth, yeah. among other things, if you keep in mind that when you grow old, you won't be able to be as physically active as you can be when you're young, that reminds you, when you're young, when you have the chance, be more physically active. And the rat that drags Chelfa away from getting close to Thor reminds me of something you see in like Heart of Darkness video game. Not Heart of Darkness the book, if the book is anything like Apocalypse Now, I want to say is what it's called, the movie adaptation. Amazing movie. Probably never going to do a video, way above my pay grade. And Chelfa saves Thor, and Quark realizes this is something Chelfa has to do on his own, without Röskva. And I will go into more detail about this event in the notes taken before watching segment. And they party, and Röskva is ecstatic that Quark will stay with them. What she sings translates from Danish literally to you stay with us, you'll stay with us, you'll stay with us, you'll stay with us forever. And Thor turns down drink, and Loki's like, ha 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 ha. And then Loki turns down food, and then the fire deity eats it in front of him, and Quark nearly kills it with water. It makes it much smaller, certainly. I really love Loki, is it called caressing his spirit, the thing when he realizes they were tricked. He's specifically realizing with the woman being old age, there's a sense of respect. He respects that they were tricked, and he's kind of impressed by the trick they used. He's like, I gotta remember that for later or something, And we have the whole mad thing, the magic with Quark, a chicken, impersonating Quark through magic, and they go back, and Röskva is, sad, and she goes to the, and she leaves Bilskirna, Thor's home, and goes out into the woods, and she's like, she's probably just gonna sulk, gonna mope, it's like, I'm sorry, what I'm saying is, when she goes to the tree house, which I have to imagine, even as a child, it was like, Thor clearly does not put it back on the tree, he throws it away, and given his force, you would expect it to be in just completely shattered, but I guess the idea is maybe Quark rebuilt it, because it does seem like he's maybe been there a while. Anyway, she's not going there expecting to find him there. She's going there because it was where she was happy with him. And she hears and Quark and Röskva whistle to each other like a greeting, and and he made he throws stuff out as and again, the music as he throws stuff out is just so good. And he made a bunch of step ladders while sitting there waiting for her. I think the round things he's throwing are supposed to be beehives because of the honey he gave her, but we don't see a single bee coming out of them or become out of them. And there's a lot of them, so he must have gone pretty far to get all of them. I don't know. I think maybe there it does go a little. It strains credulity a little. It's one of the only things in the movie where I feel like they go. It's a little too far. I get what they're doing. It's the amount. It's essentially like this is how happy they are to see each other again. But it's a little. Anyway, not counting the end credits, the movie is 71 minutes long, and in my personal opinion, they fly right by. Honestly, I do think that the people who do think so are spoiled by very plot-driven animated movies. So they think everything animated should be very plot-driven. I would definitely grant that there are much more plot-driven animated movies. Some of the Disney animated classics I've seen, for example. But I completely disagree that it is not an indulgent movie. Anyway, I was not sure how long this video was gonna get. It's 1 hour and 14 and a half minutes, and we are 3 pages, almost 4, into a 12-page document. So yeah, strap in. I'm glad that it is this. I just wasn't sure I would have that much to say necessarily, but I do absolutely love this movie and the myths and the comics. Notes taken before watching, although I will admit I didn't remember that the comics were, kind of repetitive when it came to the bickering between the children some of the time. There the movie moves much smoother, more streamlined. Anyway, I used to read the comics about Quark. I liked them at the time, but I haven't read any of them for at least a decade, I think, so I can't say if I would still like them. It's, I remember a couple of the individual. I do remember, like, there was this one where, like, the kid gets, the troll son gets, like, a little too much taken off the top, and, like, there's this woman, maybe like an old woman, who's like, oh no, a skinhead. I'm pretty sure that was the first time I was like, I mean, I think, I was like, skinhead, I don't know what that is. I'm 7 years old. I guess I better go ask my father. And my father was probably, well, when a boy loves hating another ethnicity very much, he builds camps. And it's just like, wow, how is this in something that's aimed at children? But anyway, let's see. I have not watched any of the short films about Quark. I probably used to know that they existed and just forgot, but when I looked this up, I was like, movie connections. Oh, here's like 8 short films about Quark. Yeah, it's not surprising to me that they made a bunch, because, he was popular. But, and I'm not necessarily saying that they should have made more Valhalla movies, but I don't know. I think it's probably one of those things where, like some of the Disney, when they did like shorts and characters would appear elsewhere, that it isn't necessarily, you get the sense that this character maybe worked better when it was in this other, I don't know, context. I love the casting. When I first watched this as a kid, each time that I first heard the voice of a character, I realized which actor was playing it, and I was like, perfect choice. And this is where it's so good that it's animation. Dick Kaiser, who plays the voice of Thor, he's not that impressive. He used to play like the father of this put upon like tween teenage kid. I cannot believe I've forgotten his name. Komme. His name is Komme. They made a bunch of movies. I cannot believe. I watched every single one of those movies that I could get my hands on when I was younger. See, this is old age. This is the ripe old age of early 30s. Wow. Anyway, he used to play the dad in those, and he was not like super impressive. He's, I don't know, I haven't seen him in anything for decades. So yeah, at least 1 decade. I have no idea. Anyway, it's possible that sometimes in other roles he does look cooler, but like if you had said he's gonna play Thor in a movie, I would have been like, you're crazy. But him doing the voice, because he does have this deep voice, he has, his voice does sell. This is the god of thunder. I mean, when he is angry, it's like thunder, like the roar of thunder, when he shouts something in fury. So yeah, you need someone with boom to their voice, and it's perfect. And let's see, I didn't take a lot of notes about the specific actors, but yeah, a couple I did take. Loki is played by Preben Christensen. See, my mind was like, I'm gonna have to say something in Danish in a little bit. And Quark is played by Thomas Eje, or apparently he was like, I had forgotten this, but when he went to America for, I think it was like between 2006 and 2008, he was trying to make a career over there. And he went by Tom Dane, which is probably good, because Eje is like, yeah, it would, I mean, I don't know, I guess he could have put a Y instead of the J, make it EYE, and then, you know, yeah, anyway, these are two of the three members of Linje 3, a group that would perform, you know, on stage, perform songs. Sometimes they'd like mildly dress up, or they'd alter the lyrics, such as translating English songs into Danish, sometimes with hilarious results. One of the really notable examples being that they, let's see, I have no idea what the song is called, but some of the lyrics, I think it's the chorus goes, yes sir, that's my baby, no sir, that's not my baby, yes sir, that's my baby now. And before they got to the chorus, they would sing like one line, and then they would stop and be like, see, it's okay so far. And then right before they got to the chorus, they'd be like, and this is where it falls apart. And they literally translate baby into like infant. And that's suddenly like, yeah, then it does fall apart. That's really, and it is like, I mean, that is the literal translation, you know, baby does mean infant. I mean, since they performed that, it's not as funny anymore, because now you might hear someone call, you know, I don't know, not necessarily often, but some Danes might use the word baby about. I mean, we do use, you know, cutesy words like that about, you know, our boyfriend or girlfriend, so that's now. Anyway, both of these two of the three members have had more stuff outside of that group than the middle member, Anders Bjørkov. I feel bad for him because he is talented. I did look up briefly. He's Rex in the Danish dub of the Toy Story movies. I mean, I remember almost nothing about I only watched the first one, and I have no interest in watching the other ones. No, that's too. I'm not gonna say that out loud. No, that's too. Sometimes I think of jokes that are a little too. Even if I would have to watch it because like there's a child that would really want to watch it, and I would still probably not. Okay, maybe in those cases. That was not what I thought anyway. That was not the joke that I didn't want to tell. Anyway, I do remember Rex. You know, and I think. I don't know if I watched the Danish dub or English. A lot of them I did watch the Danish dub. You know, I didn't hear the English voices. If you had told me as a child that by listening to the Danish version of Lion King, I was missing Blackadder. Okay, I didn't know him as Blackadder, but Rowan Atkinson as Zazu, and frickin' Darth Vader as Mufasa. Yeah, I would have been like, okay, I know enough English to understand that. Let me hear so I can imagine that I don't even think I asked to watch Toy Story. I think somebody else was like, you're a child, so you should watch Toy Story. And I was like, why is Sid supposed to be the bad guy? He doesn't know that the toys are alive. He doesn't know that he's torturing. It's We're supposed to be like, he's torturing. He doesn't know he's torturing. If the toys would show, hey, we're alive, we can feel everything you're doing to us, you know, the unethical thing is them never showing that. Anyway, I like small soldiers. Army men. There's some good stuff in the Army Men games, that I will say, and that did come out of Toy Story. But it's not as though no one could have thought to have, little toy soldiers like that run around. So even that you don't get credit for. Anyway, now back to my notes. The group apparently, going back Danish Wikipedia, started in 1979, so by 1986 everyone knew them. Preben Christensen can with ease sound very manipulative. It's not his, he can also be very charming, but just his voice, he does not normally sound manipulative, but he can play manipulative. I wouldn't want the Thor actor playing Loki, for example. I don't think he would be anywhere near as good. But yeah, they're manipulative, so he's perfect for Loki. Thomas I can make a lot of noises with his mouth. I'm not sure it's quite like that guy in Police Academy, but he is incredibly talented at that. He's talented at a bunch of other things as well. He can play every instrument ever invented. But yeah, he's perfect for Quark because there are all these little noises, and yeah, I think someone told me that he was the voice of Quark, or voice. In the book, they do write out Hi Roskva, but it's kind of like the letters are strangely shaped and such, suggesting that he doesn't pronounce it quite correct or something. I prefer that he just does not speak, It's not as though he can't communicate at all. So yeah, it was really it was exactly right to have him as the voice. I can imagine he was also the voice for Quark in the shorts. Now, this has so many characters from the Nordic mythology included, and they are all perfectly characterized. See, those who are there's not enough, too much time passes with that plot, they might be like, let's just remove Loki and Meatma. Are you kidding me? The fact that Loki's, and I'd forgotten, but it's kind of funny that the raven lands on his head. It's like, wow, that's a stupid, that's that thing. I think, I guess you might not know that if you're not Danish. Piet Hein, I want to say is his name. He wrote a bunch of, he would write these short little, I forget what he called them, but they basically truisms. And one of them was, every chess game has 3 players. The 2 people, playing the game, and the 3rd player who always knows what move the player should have made instead of the move he just made. That's perfect. And yeah, that's Hugin is that 3rd player, and he's like, I can't believe it. And he's up here on the head, and Odin just grabs him by the beak and that's quite funny. That's basically the only joke they really have with Odin. But yeah, and he at first he doesn't pay attention to Röskva at all, which is also such a great for one thing, it's this how children are often ignored by those who are no longer children, especially adults. And then you add that she's a human and he is a god. He is the king of the gods. Obviously, that is, let's see. I was going somewhere else with that also, I think, but anyway, once he does start paying attention, and then Quark starts throwing Mima's head into the air, and then they get kicked out. It's perfectly characterized with that, and the various. If this movie, it was a lot of people watched it, but it also went over budget, so they did not. It's basically, I think it was a financial, failure, and that also it got some negative. Not all the critics liked it, or they liked some parts, but the audience is definitely. A lot of people watched it, 500,000, which is pretty big for Denmark. and probably and yeah, in 1986 was especially was also. Anyway, let's see. If they had made more than one, I do think that they could probably fit in more of the gods, because even just in the first book, there are a lot. I'll get to that, but yeah, the various gods who embody various aspects and have very different personalities and such. And yeah, if they had made more than one Valhalla movie, they could have done. I think they did a really good job of making more than, like, if they had just. I think I've read some critics saying, they should have picked only one book. See, that criticism makes perfect sense for the first live action Asterix. Is that how? I don't. Asterix is how we say it here. That movie definitely took too many books. And some of the books they took so little from that it's like, why did you take any from it? You're not doing the story any justice at all. This case, they did a great job. I really don't. If they had taken just the first book, literally after Chef and Rushka make it to Asgard, then there's this thing about how Fenrir, the Fenris wolf, has gotten loose, and then the gods debate how to get him back, and they have a couple of different. They try a couple of different times, and then it turns out that Röskva is actually the one that's. I'll get more into detail, but anyway, that's it. It just and I mean basically. Yeah, I'll get more into it because I already made notes. So instead of me forgetting what to say here, that would not have been enough. I mean, come on. Would you really want this movie without Jotunheim? Without all the Jotun? Makes no sense to me. Makes no sense to me. And it's not there in the first book because it's the first book. They knew that they were making more than one book. With this movie, they didn't necessarily expect to make more than one. I actually have no idea if they were hoping to make more. I mean, there's, I don't know, 12 books, 20 books, something. I read all of them when I was younger. And there's, there are a lot of stories. The books pretty much, as far as I know, they're always retellings of the actual Norse myth. The old myths, and just they put some modern spin on it, and they make it more accessible for children, but these are stories that used to be considered gospel, and it's such a great place to start for a child. Anyway, and let's see. Oh, and if you're like, I don't want my child to, if you're like Swedish, Norwegian, Danish, I'm sorry, I really think it's worth. It's our culture, It's what it's literally what we used to believe. It helped shape our worldview and our lives. I think it's important to keep stuff like that alive. I'm not saying you have to believe it still, but I think there's a lot of worth to what we used to believe, what we used to think about things. If you don't know where something, what something used to be, then you don't know then you don't fully understand what it is now. Now. Well, I mean, I guess, if your culture, if you're an immigrant or, second generation or whatever, and you don't feel as connected to, your Scandinavian country, the Scandinavian country you're in, as the country your ancestors came from, I respect that. But I do not understand people who don't. Now, back to my prepared notes. this movie does not have a lot of plot. It is not what they wanted to focus on. I really don't think this movie is ever boring or indulgent. If it were, that would be a problem. But it's not a problem by itself not to have a lot of plot if it's not really the plot that's... ultimately... And really, it's not that little. I mean, ultimately... I don't know, I guess maybe they would say that, like, there didn't need to be so many different competitions, that it could have been just one, since the gods lose all of them anyway. That's also the thing. In the book, they specify if the gods win even one of them, of the competitions, then the Jotun will keep Quark. But if the gods lose all of them, then they have to keep him. Okay, so that's something they would maybe think, and I guess Thor talking about the Midgard serpent. Let's see. I guess they would say you should maybe trim the stuff with in Bilskirna, helping out as servants. I guess that would maybe be the argument they would make, but I really don't think that any of this, it's not like it's repetitious. Like, that actually, in the book, Thor does not drink from it once. He drinks from the horn, he drinks from it 3 times. And if they had all 3, then I would maybe think, okay, that's what... And I can imagine in the original myth, it was probably 3 times. It sounds like something you'd have in a myth, a myth or a fairy tale or something, But the 3rd time they try, and it's, nothing changes. It's the same. All 3 times he can't empty the horn, so there's no real point in it. It's not necessary to have all, but everything that's in the movie, it's not repetitious. It adds character and atmosphere, and it's Norse myth. It's mythology. It takes a lot of this. A lot of the stories are, by our standards, a little. They're not. When you sit down and you watch a movie, you expect a story a certain way, whereas these myths, they don't tell stories specifically for that. And I think they found the right balance between those two. Now, the world building is amazing. Every area, every character, every object, everything, and so much included. With locations, we of course spend very little time on Earth because it's by far the most boring. We spend just enough time on Earth to appreciate just how epic, Asgard and Jotunheim are. But we've all seen Earth, but we travel across the Rainbow Bridge, we go to Valhalla, we have Bilskirna, Thor's and Sif's home, Odin's throne room, Jotunheim. I love everything about the design of Jotunheim. The magic spells, the Jotun all look so ugly and nasty. The music, some of it hard rock and heavy metal, I think, really captures the chaos and rowdy, crude nature of them. Not saying that all hard rock and heavy metal is like that, but that is something, that is one of the things that those kinds of music are trying to convey. Breaking the rules and such. And the gods are seen in several different situations, including some domestic, but the Jotun are only ever seen throwing hedonistic parties gambling, tricking others. During the parties, they will fight over food and beer and in general behave in depraved, disgusting manners, which explains why Trump is going to put Jotun into political positions. I'm not saying you're not allowed to throw a party, but I am saying if you are credibly accused of attempted rape, which failed not because you realized what you were doing was horrible, you shouldn't be given political power. Now, not only does this manage to include a ton of our mythology, it does so in a way that children can process, and really anyone watching this can get excited about Nordic mythology. I've known people who didn't care that much about it before watching this, but did start to once they did watch this. And the comics themselves are also a great place to start learning about it. But yeah, like when I was a kid, I mean, this was also like school activity, but this was something I loved. I'm like in like wood shop. I made like a long sword, and it looked like something that like a Viking would use. And I, the sword itself, there wasn't a lot. Or was there? I forget how much choice I had in the sword itself, but each of us were to write, was it supposed to be our own initials? I forget, but I wrote RL for Ragnar Lodbrok. And if you have no idea who that is, look him up. It's amazing. Just, again, Danish pride. And yeah, I realized some of this means nothing to people who have no idea about art, and that's something I can live with. Most of my videos are for international audiences, but this is one of the rare cases. Now, at least I'm not performing the video in Danish, because I know people flip out when I do that. Right, so that was one thing. I also made like this big round shield, and was there other, I forget if there, maybe a belt? Possibly, but yeah, and when I was a kid, I would play with them all the time. Now, back to my notes. I consider the characterizations and interpersonal relationships to all be very accurate, very believable, and the gods and other creatures truly do embody certain aspects. Thor with his sudden roaring, dangerous rage is like thunder and lightning. And let's see. Loki's always tricking and manipulating. He's the one who gets the children to be, or Chelfe anyway. Now, and the protagonists, whose point of view is clearly told through, are, children, Chelfe, Roshka, and Quark, which makes it very easy to relate to for children. All three of them have very clear, specific motivations and personalities. Chelfe wants adults to think of him as a man rather than a boy. Roshka wants fair and humane treatment of those without power. And Quark wants to be treated nicely. Everyone looks at him and sees an ugly, misbehaving little troll or Jotun, but once he's treated as an equal, he shows that he can be very sweet and giving. And I really appreciate that this not only acknowledges that there were child slaves back then, but forces the audience to empathize very directly with them, because that is something, historically, slaves have not gotten a lot of empathy. And, for the entirety of the movie, they are our protagonists. Either you sympathize with them or you turn off the movie. The fact that they were slaves back then is not something we should forget. We need to acknowledge the ugly parts of our past if we're to prevent them from being repeated. And let's see. Was there something else there? Not entirely sure. Now, and this manages to communicate a number of fable and fairy tale morals, most of them within a very short time. No one man can tear through something as fast as fire can. No one can outrun a thought. No one man can drink the ocean. Everyone ages and eventually grows weak. And there is a limit to even the strongest man's strength, which, very literally in this is no one man can lift the Midgard serpent. The gods have the power that our faith gives them. Everyone needs someone else. These are lessons that everyone will have to accept, and by forcing, the movie forces gods to accept them, suddenly it's a lot more okay for regular people to accept them as well. I don't really, this sounds like you're just trying to keep me from doing something that I'm pretty sure I could do. But if Thor can accept it, then I guess I can. And let's see. Right, I've got a bunch of stuff here about the opening scene. I love the entire first scene before we leave Midgard. The family's mother shouts at the boy, telling him to come in away from the terrible weather. And not long after, it's confirmed that the thunder is because of Thor, and he then lands his chariot. Thor supplies the food, with the humans, of course, providing their home, cooking the food, etc. The food supplied is one of his own goats, and after all, they will regenerate. And I'm not 100% certain the following is true of this particular region, or if it's only other. But anyway, something that was believed was this idea that we're always eating the same animals each time we ate a member of a specific species, which is part of why the animals, even when they're being eaten, deserve respect. After all, why would they agree to continue being eaten if they were mistreated? Loki fully understands this, and so tricks, baits, goads the boy into breaking one of the bones. He may be from Jotunheim, but he is clearly trolling here, because he's bored by Thor telling the same story again. And he, of course, he goes in with saying, maybe you don't have the guts, maybe you're scared to do it. And then once Thor becomes enraged, and in the book we see him ready a lightning bolt, and it's like, is he gonna kill this child? Is he gonna destroy their home? What exactly would have happened if Loki hadn't stepped in, solved the problem that he caused? And was Loki always intending to get Thor at least one more slave? Did he get the previous ones killed by getting Thor enraged? And Loki uses his silver tongue to convince Thor to settle for getting a slave, his parents to give up their only son, and at such a young age, and the boy himself into being a slave. There's no real indication in the movie, and not in those of the books that I read, I forget if later, that the boy will not be a slave for as long as he lives. And certainly the movie makes completely clear that being a slave for a god is incredibly grueling, miserable work. Now, there are some details in the books that I quite love that didn't make it into the movie. Heimdall, who guards Bifrost, at first doesn't want to let the children through, but Loki scares him with the description of a Jotun. Thor scares him with his rage, and when he first hears the girl sneeze before he's seen her, he thinks she's from Jotunheim, and he terrified screams, "Mothers," which the book notes had, with the book noting he has 9, which I have to wonder how the birth process worked out. Did all 9 pop out into, some part of his body, and then it all reattached? I don't know. I said I love our Nordic mythology. I didn't say I never crack jokes at its expense. And as Odin plays the chess game, the pieces actually talk, speaking English. When Fenrir the wolf escapes, there's an open debate between all the gods. Frey, the farmer and god of fertility, worries that the wolf will attack his animals. Thor wants to attack, kill the wolf. Tyr, the god of war, suggests turning all of Asgard into a police state, which, I mean, in 1986 was not, that was nowhere near as much of a hot button issue as today. Heimdall eagerly agrees, listing proposals. Freya, the goddess of love, insists keeping freedom in place, and Frigga the Wise points out that not only do they want to chain Fenrir, they are now putting chains on themselves as well. Excuse me, just kind of need to do this. And when the first couple of attempts to chain the wolf fail, Tyr mobilizes the army, which ends up not at all being effective against the wolf. As they march through the farm of Frey, they scare, kill, and eat some of his cows. Historically, that is what would happen when an army would march, pillaging even their own side. Ultimately, they manage to chain the wolf again because Röskva shows it kindness, something it has not experienced since it was initially chained up, despite receiving it before then, when it was little and cute. Let's see. Before people started fearing what they used to love. Let's see. Yeah, that's gonna be what I meant to say. What it meant. And once it was chained up, Röskva still wants to take it for walks and tells Loki. Despite all the trouble they've had with it, he says it's fine for her to do so, just don't ask permission. Her relationship with the wolf is similar to her relationship with Quark. And Frigga, or Twitter, as it at first voice typed, which I guess is what we ask today, is asked why she seems sad since there's nothing threatening us anymore, to which she simply responds, isn't there? And Thor's house has 540 rooms, and if you're not careful, you can get... There was someone who got lost for 3 years because they didn't know where they were going. And let's see. Yeah, and 540 rooms. And in the 3 books I read for this, no one lives there except for Thor, Sif, or for fifth, as the first time we got it at first. There are 2 infants and the 2 human children. And Thor's 2 goats are named Tengnost and Tengrisna. And I tried to Google, I didn't spend forever on it, so there might be, modern translations. It's not, they're not words that I recognize as modern. Anyway, now the Young Turks covered that Fox News called Jamie Lee Curtis a hypocrite for being pro-gun control whilst wielding guns in the new Halloween movie. And since then I've also seen some great tweets on it. Anyway, while I, as usual, greatly appreciate the Young Turks video, something I wish they had gone into is that this conflates being pro-gun control with thinking that no one should have guns. And they do somewhat get into that in the College Humor article with Twitter, tweets. Conflates being pro-gun control with thinking that no one should have guns under any circumstances. I haven't watched the movie yet, but if Laurie Strode passed a thorough background check, and given the fact that she's smart and rarely breaks the law, I don't see why she wouldn't. I mean, in the first one, they keep saying she's a Girl Scout, and that's, very appropriate. She keeps, she's always afraid to break the rules when someone might find out. That's one thing. And, if she bought the guns illegally, and if she only uses them to protect herself or others, which is certainly what it looks like in the trailer, see her urge children to get out of the way, both keeping them safe from Michael and avoiding herself accidentally shooting them, then that is entirely consistent with the pro-gun control stance. And, the Twitter, the article there also points out, she's against AR-15s, and that's not what she uses in the movie. She uses, a bolt lever rifle, something like that. I forget what it's been a long time. I don't understand why I'm kind of sleepy, because I slept plenty last night. Anyway, there's stuff like that that's, anyway, yeah. If there's literally someone running around with a knife killing people, it makes sense to try to shoot them, especially if you can't get the police to, and certainly in these movies the police are not that effective against Michael. The movie has one of those paranoid fantasies that conservatives use to justify why they need their guns as its plot. I'm really looking forward to watching it, because I can tell a movie apart from reality. And the TYT video also mentions that, there's also this tweet about how Trump in Home Alone 2, there he helps a child separated from his parents, when in reality, yeah. The joke in Home Alone 2, the joke with Trump is literally that he is not recognized as being Donald Trump, as being important. I guess it was his ego was less fragile back then, or maybe he just didn't get the joke. I mean, today, if you suggested, let's put a joke in the movie where someone doesn't recognize Donald Trump, he would never accept it, but yeah. I mean, literally, there's no other joke there. It's not, look, it's a famous person. No, it's, look, Kevin doesn't know who Donald Trump is. He asks him for, I think, directions or something, as if it's just a regular person and not, a guy who keeps claiming he's rich and self-made millionaire, when really there's a lot to suggest that he isn't. And the sequence where they build a treehouse uses visuals and music incredibly well. A lot of the sequence passes with absolutely no words, and yet it communicates so much. And again, it's like 4 minutes of absolutely no words being said or written. When Loki comes back with Quark, he shows that he can temporarily make an apple appear as a bat. In the book, he makes clear that he meant to turn it into a butterfly. In both cases, Quark sabotages him. At the end of the movie, he makes a chicken temporarily appear to be Quark. Set up and payoff. The movie manages drama incredibly well. It's not a surprise that it can be light, cute, look really good, but it also does the drama right. When the movie means for you to care about something, you care. Now, that brings us... okay, that was a lot of pages in not very much time. IMDb and Wikipedia, and also some Rotten Tomatoes and such. Anyway, there is no tomato meter. If I recall correctly, there is not a single critic review on Rotten Tomatoes for this. There are some audience reviews, but there's not a single. Did I get that right? I think so. I think there's some audience reviews. Anyway, did I only see ones on IMDb? I forget. Now, but yeah, the audience, 73% liked it with an average rating of 3.9 out of 5 and 422 user ratings. That makes a lot of sense to me. It is not a movie for everyone. Now, let's see. Yeah, and some of this is just going to be me reading reviews that I think are noteworthy. Not always that I agree with. Anyway, it interestingly juxtaposes dark yet exquisite scenery with silly childlike behavior, and for that I applaud Peter Masson, who wrote the books and helped animate the movie. I'm not going to get into exactly what roles and what the titles of those roles are. You can look that up. But he did amazing work on both. Now, he does say, I thought the story was uninspired. I guess I was expecting something a little more epic. I mean, I guess you could say maybe Ragnarok itself might be epic, but I think, I mean, when you look at the myths, they're not the kind of thing that we would necessarily want to see in a movie today. They are sometimes more like fairy tales, and traditional fairy tales often aren't made directly into movies. There's like commentary and such today. Now, let's see. The movie is quirky and offbeat and likes a bit of classic American storyline and feels like a fable or a mythological tale, which makes sense after all. And the animation is spot on and has much eye for detail. Compared to most of Disney's cartoons and the more recent output of DreamWorks and Company, the movie feels very true and honest, like a granny's retelling of an ancient story, and is very heartwarming. Very true. Now. Okay, here we go. Yeah, there is perhaps more cuteness than true drama, and the film is left too short to be epic, but these are descriptions rather than criticisms. Yeah. Now. Yeah, this entire review is on IMDb. I'm just gonna. I don't have anything to add to it, so I suggest you read it on IMDb. Now, let's see. But yeah, this guy says that, Thor playing with his children and the hut building, the drag, and I, agree to disagree. I think they're perfectly paced. And then he says, another weakness might be that the movie feels a bit like it expects the viewer to know the mythology by heart at times. I don't think the idea is for every viewer to know the mythology. But certainly if the children watching it can ask their parents and get immediate answers, that might be more gratifying to the children. But other than that, any question that the movie leaves you with about Nordic mythology, go and research and find out what it means. Which, when this came out, was a bit more difficult than just typing into Google. It's supposed to get you excited about this world. I'm not saying that every movie could pull this off, but we're a bit spoiled today. Not every movie is something you just sit down and immediately can follow. And keep in mind that ultimately, the things in this movie that you absolutely need to be able to follow, you can. Quark is considered trouble by all the adults. Thor temporarily dies near the end. And something every child can relate to, adults simply don't listen when children explain to them their problems. These things are very clearly communicated in the movie. And those are the things that are necessary. Those are the things that are necessary to communicate clearly. A few more things that I thought of. Why the three children leave Thor's house. Why the gods want to win in Jotunheim, but Roshka and Quark do not. The details and explanations, those may need you to find the answers. In the book, you'll find out that if they manage to kill Thor, then they would be able to take over Asgard, as he is the strongest of the gods. In the book, you're told that the flame that eats Loki is an actual flame god, or maybe I'm thinking of Wikipedia. I read the entire page specifically for this movie. Now, and let's see. And I guess yeah, briefly, I think Nils Bak Mikkelsen is his entire name. The deep booming voice, absolutely perfect for Udgårdsloke. And Klaus Ryskjær, and I only have the surname here, Rolfes, as Hugin and Moonin are incredible. And I can't understand people who find Quark absolutely intolerable. Yeah, that's you're gonna be very frustrated because he's in a lot of it. I tried to notice. I think 15 minutes into the film is when he enters, and really he's there for the entire rest of the movie. He's briefly gone when they think that he's gonna stay in Jotunheim, and there are parts that are focused on other characters than him, but I mean the core conflict is that is whether or not basically where he's gonna stay, essentially. Is he gonna stay with Thor in his home? Is he gonna stay in the woods in a treehouse? Is he gonna stay in Jotunheim? Now, let's see. And not sure how much of this I'm going to read. Yeah, just briefly, this one guy says, from looking at other reviews, it seems like a lot of people saw this as children, fell in love with it, and are still looking at it through that lens. I'm not saying that no one does that, and I certainly do that with some things, but if I had never watched this before today, I think a big part of it is whether you care about these myths. Like, if you show the Passion of the Christ to someone who's not Christian, someone who doesn't even know what Christianity is, you're going to get a hugely different response. This was made by Danes for Danes. Yes, it's also, for international audiences. But if this was supposed to be like for people who have no idea, if they made it specifically, primarily for people who don't know anything about our myths and don't feel they have any reason to care about our myths, they would have made it very differently. No, this is specifically, it's like, just, different countries produce different, and let's see. Yeah, I think that people who watch it today and don't like it are spoiled by expectations of today that were not the expectations of back then. And I mean, that's like expecting modern slang in like Shakespeare or something, being angry that it's not there. Maybe that's an exaggeration, but other than that. Now, let's see. And then this guy writes, 20-minute sequence of kids building tree houses, of clapping their hands, or endless, excruciating, frustrating sequences of Quark breaking stuff and being annoying. I don't think there's 20 minutes of... If you put together all the stuff where Quark is breaking something and then the treehouse stuff, I don't think that's 20 minutes of this movie. I hate when people write crap like that, because someone's going to read, oh, it's 75 minutes, but 20 minutes of it is just... There needs to be like this is clearly an exaggeration kind of like underlying feature on IMDb, because that's BS. There is not 20 minutes of quote unquote nothing in this entire movie, and I'm pretty much there is not 20 minutes of this movie where there isn't plot being like exposition, plot, something happening that, even if it doesn't end up altering the plot, it could alter the plot. It just, there are movies where they're like, he makes it sound like a dingo picture or something. And I forgot how bad a review that was. I did read all these reviews before today. Maybe it's just having just watched the movie and realizing just how freaking wrong he is. Yeah, this is one of the few places where I almost think censorship. 20 minutes. Freaking ridiculous. Let's see. This guy also says, a big part of the movie is dedicated to these kids playing in a treehouse. Just, if you're gonna write a review and you're gonna get into detail about that, be precise. Okay. But yeah, only 6 out of 46 people found it helpful, which, yeah. And that is all of my notes. I think that I have said everything. I love all of the music in the movie. I mean, I would buy the soundtrack, but I would just listen to a little bit of it and be like, I'd rather just watch the movie. You know, and it's probably not gonna happen. But I think a video game. Actually, are there? Like maybe not like a big video game, but certainly a Flash game or something could be made of stuff like this. And let's see. I mean, if you make one, if someone who can make it happen is watching this video, if you make a sequel to this movie, I will watch it in theaters and I will review it. I can guarantee you that. There's apparently like a thing called just Valhalla coming out like next year, and it's from like it's made by people from like Iceland or something. I don't know. I if it comes to a theater near me, I might actually watch it. There's way too little of like, yeah. I guess that's more or less it. There are way too few good stories about Vikings and their gods. Let's see. Animation is amazing from start to finish. When the casting of the Danish actors, all of them are absolutely spot on. It's actually, I mean, it's always, when you get like child actors, Laura Bro, who plays Röskva, great here, and she grew up and did other movies where I also really like her. So yeah, it's one of those cases where she was already a really good actress back then, and yeah, I think that might more or less cover it. It's a little weird that like Osfrø is not at all in this, but I guess, I mean, yeah, he could have played one of the Ravens, definitely. Yeah, I get, they basically cast whoever was the most. I mean, I guess also, 86, that's after the Olsen Gang movies. So he wasn't as prominent anymore. Anyway, yeah, amazing movie. I'm gonna watch it, a dozen more times and still not be tired of it. I guess, personally, sometimes you have to space it out a little, be careful not to watch the same thing too close to. But other than that, I can, there are a lot of movies that I can watch a lot of times. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching as I enjoyed recording, and I will catch you next time.